In this part, we're going to examine anti-block rules, which are rules telling us that there cannot be a certain fixed relationship between two letters. Here we're told that a paranormal detective visits 5 haunted sites, one at a time, and we're keeping track of an order here, so we know that there's going to be 5 slots. Here are the 5 variables, B, L, M, Y, and Z. The first rule says that the detective does not visit L immediately before or immediately after Z. So that means we cannot see L, Z, and we also cannot see ZL. These are not allowed. To diagram this kind of rule, I'll just diagram LZ in a reversible block with a slash through it, but if you prefer, you could write both of the possibilities that are not allowed, no LZ, no ZL. The next rule says the detective does not visit the barn immediately before the mansion, so you cannot put a B before the M like this. But notice that this does not prevent M followed immediately by B. This is allowed, but this one is not allowed. So I'll go ahead and diagram that rule like this, a BM block with a slash through it, but it's not reversible, so that's why I'm not putting the switch above it. And the final rule is the laboratory is visited before the barn, so that's L before B. Every letter except for the Y is mentioned in a rule, so let me go ahead and circle the Y as our free agent. And now let's talk about inferences between these rules and potential connections. Anti-blocks are actually very difficult to connect to other rules, and in most cases, you actually cannot connect anti-blocks to other rules. Take a look at Rule 1 and 3, which both mention the L. It doesn't make any sense to do something like this, where you have your anti-block and then the B after the anti-block. That doesn't make any sense because the LZ is something that you're not allowed to see. You're not going to see an LZ. So putting the B after it just doesn't make any sense. I'd actually just leave Rule 1 and 3 separate from each other. Same thing with Rule 2 and 3. You know you can't have the B immediately before the M, but this does not make any sense at all. Because the L is going to come before the B, but you're not going to see this BM. So this does not help us understand the connection between 2 and 3. We're going to just have to leave rules 2 and 3 separate. So with regular blocks and gapped blocks, although we usually can connect them to other rules, with anti-blocks, we can't really do much with them at the start. In addition, when it comes to splitting into worlds, anti-blocks are not very useful because they just have way too many possibilities. You know that the L and the Z have to be apart from each other, but that could happen in so many different ways, right? It could be L, Z, it could be L, Z, it could be L, Z, and that's just what happens if you put the L in one. There's a lot of other places you could put the L, so I'm not inclined to do any kind of split. It would be a complete waste of time. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, couldn't I split based on where the B goes? Because you know L has to come before B, and you know the M can't go immediately after the B. Now, that might initially seem useful because there's only 4 places that the B could go, but the problem is this is not a block type of rule. And so, yeah, if you put the B in 2, the L is forced into 1. That does tell you something. But if you put the B in 3, the L now has multiple possibilities. If you put the B in 4, the L now has even more possibilities. Same if you put it into 5. So that's why a regular dash type of rule is generally not a useful way to split a game, at least when you have more than 2 or 3 different possibilities. Here we have 4 possibilities for the B. That's not going to really tell us much about where the L goes or the other letters go. So if I were faced with this set of rules, I'd be confident in just going to the questions. There isn't any more work to be done up front. Before we move on to another game, I do want to walk through how anti-blocks are actually useful when it comes to making inferences on questions. Although we couldn't do much with them at the start, oftentimes once we start getting new conditions in the problems, anti-blocks become useful. For example, let's say we're doing a question and we know that the M is in the 4th spot and B is in the 5th spot for that question. Can you figure out how the remaining letters and rules are going to be arranged? L, Z, and Y. Well, you know that the L and the Z, they can't go next to each other and it doesn't matter the order. So that means that you have to have at least one space in between L and Z. There's no way you could put LZ like this, and there's no way you could put LZ like this. What we have to do is we have to put one of L or Z in spot number 1 and the other in spot number 3 to keep them apart from each other. And now we know the remaining letter, the final letter Y, will have to go in spot 2. So that's something you want to look out for when you have an anti-block, a reversible anti-block. You have to split them up when you only have 3 spaces left. What if we have another situation and we know the M is in the 3rd spot, the B is in the last spot? How can we arrange the L, Z, and Y? Well, since the L and the Z, they can't go next to each other and it doesn't matter the order, that means the L and the Z are not going to go together in 1 and 2. You can't put both of them in 1 and 2. That means one of the L or Z is going to have to go to the 4th spot like this. The other one, however, could go in either 1 or 2, so I'll just go ahead and write a Z/L with a circle above it. One of the Z or L is going to go in 1 or 2. What else is going to go in 1 or 2? It's going to be the remaining letter, the Y. And let's work through one more example. Let's say we know that the Y is in 2 and the M is in 5. What's the rest of the order going to look like? Let me start with the B-M rule. B cannot go immediately before M. So that means the B is not going to go over here. The B looks like it's going to go in either 1 or 3. But then you take a look at the other rule that mentions B. L has to go before B, and so that means the B cannot go first because you have to leave room for the L. That's what tells us that the B has to go in 3 with the L in 1, and that means the Z would have to go in 4. Now, the other way to come to that exact same set of inferences is to start with the LZ. You know the LZ can't go next to each other, so they can't go together in 3 and 4. That might initially make you think that Z or L is going to have to go over here, and then you'd realize, well, I still have to put the B down. The B can't go next to the M, so the B has to go over here. L has to go before B. That's why number 1's got to be L, and Z's got to be 4.